Welcome to Inside Knowledge with Lynn Henderson, the show about overcoming adversity, building resilience, and creating a better life for yourself and those you love.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Inside Knowledge. I'm your host, Lynn Henderson, and I'm so pleased to have Lisa Avery on the show today. As a positive psychologist, coach, and writer, Lisa helps individuals connect with the unique passion and purpose that drives their personal and professional success. She is fascinated by what propels a person to pursue their vocation, entwining their innate strengths, values, and interests to serve both themselves and the rest of the world. She fuses the art of coaching with the science of positive psychology to help individuals gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to become all they aspire to be. Well, hi Lisa, thank you so much for agreeing to appear on this episode.
Thank you so much for having me, Lynn. I'm really excited to be here.
Great, and I should say that Lisa lives in Spain. And obviously doesn't sound Spanish, so that might be my first question.
Yes, Lynn, so I'm actually English, but I've been over here in Spain for the last 12 years. I came over here straight after university and I wasn't really sure how long I was going to stay, but I've been totally seduced by the sunshine, the incredible food and wine over here, the Spanish language. So yes, I'm still here all these years later.
Oh, fantastic. And I mean, this is completely going off to the side, but do you think being an expat, does it require a certain degree of resilience, or is life easier for you there?
Perhaps so. I think, being an expat, you're always going to stand out just a little bit. I'm obviously never going to look or sound very Spanish. And I think it really taps into the human desire to fit in, both to fit in and to stand out. I think we have a bit of an internal battle. On the one hand, we want to be celebrated for our individual differences. So, I'm English, I embrace that. On the other hand, at times, we do want to feel like we belong. So I think in that case, sometimes you do need that little bit of resilience, especially when you first move to a foreign land, and you can feel quite alone and you can miss certain things about home. So I think resilience in any situation goes a very long way. Absolutely.
Fantastic. And just to clarify, what is your own personal definition or understanding of resilience?
Sure. So I see resilience as the ability to bounce back from adversity, and that is emotionally, psychologically, and physically. Not only to bounce back, but sometimes people even thrive after adversity. There is something which is known as post-traumatic growth, and in many cases this is experienced by people. So I think, initially at the time of adversity, it's the ability to bounce back from that, and perhaps later even thrive in the wake of something which has been very difficult on many levels.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now you're trained in positive psychology, but you also are trained in coaching. Can you tell me how those two fit together?
Sure. Yeah, good question. Thanks, Lynn. So I've just completed a 3-year master's degree in positive psychology and coaching psychology, and they actually entwine perfectly because positive psychology is the study of human flourishing. So what goes right in human beings and how we can live optimal, happy and thriving lives. And coaching, coaching is giving a person the space in which to reflect on their narrative so that they're able to create the lives that they really want to create. In everyday life, in our interactions, in our relationships, often people are too close to home. They're too close to us in the sense that we can't necessarily open up to them and sort of reveal our deepest fears, our deepest desires. Coaching is really a space in which we're able to reflect upon our identity and really consider that which we really desire in our lives. And I think, coaching and positive psychology, they work so well together because when you have some understanding of human flourishing, you can help, you can inspire, the person within the space within the coaching realm to really to think about how to make the positive changes in their mindset, in their way of thinking, in their way of doing, so as to inspire the change that they really want to create in their lives. So the two work very, very well together.
And is that primarily what you do, coaching one-on-one with people?
Yes, absolutely. I do coaching one-on-one and some group coaching too. And then I also speak a little bit around positive psychology. I have to make a distinction, when coaching, I would never ever tell somebody what to do. It very much comes from the person themselves. I ask questions which would really stimulate thought-provoking responses, but I would never ever give directions. I would never ever tell a person what to do. Whereas in positive psychology, yes, I'm able to share information with a person about what science, what research shows leads to a happy and healthy and flourishing life. So, in one case I would be giving advice, and in the other case I definitely wouldn't, but sometimes the two do overlap. So it really depends on the client that I'm working with.
Great. And one of my interests is trying to work out how much of being a resilient person is the way you're born, your character, how much is to do with what happens to you as you're growing up, and how much can be taught in like a classroom setting or a coaching setting. And I wonder,
Sure.
Do you think you're a naturally resilient person?
Okay, sure. So in answer to the first question, how much is genetic? Well, they say that when it comes to happiness, and I think happiness and resilience are very connected, because, the more resilient you are, the more you're going to be able to, ride the waves of sort of negative circumstances in life. So in terms of happiness and how much is genetic, we know that approximately 50% is genetics. It's the genetic makeup that we're born with. 40% is within our control and 10% is circumstance. So 40% is the attitude, it's the habits that we choose to cultivate, to practice, to learn. And so I think that's a very empowering statistic. Only 10% is circumstantial, and that surprises a lot of people. So within that 40% that we have in our ability to control, we can learn how to be more resilient. We can learn how to manage our emotions. We can learn how to become more optimistic, how to look at life in a slightly different way. So I think that's very empowering for your listeners, Lynn.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And in terms of my level of resilience, I think I'm a fairly resilient person, but that, I have to say, the last 3 years of studying positive psychology have really had so much to do with that. I think I've learned more about myself and the way to relate to the world more in the last 3 years than in my entire life beforehand. So absolutely. So it's very empowering knowing that you can look inside of yourself and find some answers which will very much empower the way you live your life. But it's getting to that place of reflection. I think the problem is, Lynn, many times people are afraid to really look in the mirror, to sit in silence and really do the deep inner work that can lead to real lasting, meaningful happiness.
Mm. And one of the things I get a preconceived idea about positive psychology, and that it only deals with positive emotions. Is that false?
That is indeed, that is a very common misconception. I'm really glad you've said that, because I can really clarify that for your listeners. In fact, positive psychology is not to be mistaken with positive thinking. And probably the biggest takeaway that I've had from positive psychology is that it's great to embrace all emotional states. We have in our society the really bad tendency to label emotions as positive or negative. So, anger and fear are negative. We try to repress them. In fact, what positive psychology has shown is that by letting each and every emotion in, by acknowledging it, by labeling it as clearly and precisely as possible, we're actually dissipating the power of that emotion. So every time you're feeling a negative emotion, say it out loud, try to label it as clearly as possible. And then little by little, that emotion will start to lose control, because when an emotional state sweeps over us, it takes control of us both emotionally, psychologically, physiologically. So within our body itself, we have a reaction to that emotion. So by being able to take control, by becoming very mindful of what we're experiencing at any given moment, we're able to recuperate. We're able to get back to a normal functioning level much more quickly. And I think that's probably been one of my biggest takeaways of positive psychology. And in answer to the original question, positive psychology is the study of optimal human functioning. So, we look at subjects like happiness, the different kinds of happiness, how to become more authentic, how to use your character strands, how to cultivate optimism, resilience, all the subjects which contribute, all the subjects which form a part of human function, of human flourishing. It's not about just getting to the level where you're not depressed or you're not feeling angry or sad. It's about taking a person, in the past, Lynn, psychology was about correcting what was wrong with people. So it was about taking people from -10 to 0, whereas positive psychology, it's about taking people from 0 to 10, getting the very best out of people. But as I say, getting the best out of people does not mean repressing negative emotions. All emotion, in some circumstances, Lynn, sadness and anger, they would be the most natural responses, and it would be very strange if you didn't feel sad when you lost a loved one, or when you didn't feel angry, when something was being done to you or said to you. So the most healthy and natural response is the full range of human emotion.
That's interesting. So what about positive emotions then? I tend to grasp onto those.
Sure.
So should I have the same attitude to them that I do than the more negative experiences?
Well, in fact, positive emotions, so in the past, negative emotions were studied more because people thought that, well, all negative emotions served a function. So when we're angry, we have the desire to attack. When we're afraid, we have the desire to run away. So it was very clear to scientists why negative emotions existed, yet it wasn't very clear why positive emotions existed, like what was the purpose. And so there's a wonderful psychologist called Barbara Frederickson, and she looked into what the purpose of positive emotions was. And actually, she came up with this wonderful theory, which was the broaden and build theory. And the idea is every time we experience a positive emotion, it opens us up a little more to the rest of the world. It makes us more sociable, more creative, more likely to reach out to other human beings. When we're in a state of happiness or serenity or joy, we naturally become much more expansive. There was this really interesting experiment in which people were told to focus on a picture, and there were two groups of people. One had just watched some negative, some very sad film, and the others had watched something very happy, very uplifting. And actually the vision, the peripheral vision of people who'd been primed with positive emotions expanded. And so literally when we're in a positive state, we're seeing more, we're contacting people, we're opening ourselves up to more and more experience. And usually, so broaden and build, so literally it increases what we're seeing, what we're doing, and it builds these wonderful psychological resources, because every time you experience a positive emotion, it really increases your psychological resources, your bank of well-being, let's say. And so it just grows and grows, and that's a wonderful thing, because the brain is geared for negativity. We're wired for negativity. That means that we have what we call a negativity bias, so that we have evolved, if we're in a jungle, for example, and we see a lion or a tiger running towards us, or else we see the beautiful trees, we're going to focus on the lion or tiger, because that is survival. So, for every good thing that happens to us, if something negative happens, our focus will be on the negative. And that means, that we need much more positive in our lives to counterbalance any negative. And that's why, really building your emotional bank account, let's say, with positive emotions is so important. We need more positive than negative just to get to come to some kind of equilibrium, some kind of balance.
Is that easier to achieve if you're an extrovert? I'm more of an introvert, and I wonder if the same techniques work for people like me.
I think it's a really interesting question. I think when it comes to introversion and extroversion, there are a lot of misconceptions. Now, whilst extroversion has been linked, has been correlated to some positive psychological outcomes, it's true that introverts simply need a little bit more time to come back into themselves and really get that energy, recharge their batteries. Being an introvert or an extrovert, it's really about where you get your energy from. Do you get your energy? Do you boost your energy through being alone or from being with other people. And I think both introversion, I don't think there's a real difference in level of happiness or well-being between introverts and extroverts. Simply they derive their happiness from two different places, or they derive their energy, should I say, from different places. But I wouldn't say that being an introvert or extrovert kind of makes you more prone to positive emotions. I see what you're saying in the fact that I've said that positive emotions open you up to the rest of the world, but I mean that too in a very metaphorical sense. So, you know, when you're positive, when you're in a positive mood, you'll be more curious, you'll be more likely to read, to explore, you know, so not only with people, but more open to the rest of the world, I'd say, in every possible sense.
Because I have heard that connection's very important, and obviously if you're an extrovert, you've got more friends, you find it easier to socialize. I find with myself, I have to go, particularly like in person sort of group settings, I have to really make sure that I do that.
Yes.
So are there techniques that introverts can use to help them with connection?
I think, you know, what we have to think, Lynn, it's about quality and not quantity, you know, when it comes to close friendships. And I think, you know, people can be surrounded by big groups of people, but it's been proven that real connection comes through connecting about subjects on a deeper level, you know. So, for example, many men age 30, 40, 50, they report high levels of loneliness. And that can be because they're having these conversations with friends about sports, about work, about politics, but not really opening themselves up to explore their emotions on the inside. So that can feel very lonely. So I think real connection, it will never be about the number of people we know, but about the quality and of relationship and the level of openness that we have within those relationships, you know. And what we have to remember, yes, connection is extremely important. We're very sociable beings. And in fact, you know, there's a very nice acronym which I love, and this comes from the father of positive psychology, Martin Seligman. And the acronym for well-being, it's PERMA. So that's a P for positive emotions, E for engagement, R for relationships, which is exactly what you're touching on now, M for meaning, and A for achievement. And so I think, you know, for any person who wants to become more resilient, who wants to become happier, we have to try to get some kind of balance in each of these aspects of our lives. So, you know, P, more positive emotions, looking for ways in which we can experience, and bearing in mind that positive emotions, it's not just happiness, it's not just joy, if not a full range of serenity, curiosity, or, you know, there's a whole range of positive emotions that are out there for us to explore. Then we have the E, which is engagement, you know, so it's finding work in which we get lost in moments of flow, in which we're very absorbed in what we're doing. R, the relationships, which you mentioned. M, so this is the meaning. So this is a sense of finding happiness on a deeper level, you know. So there are two kinds of happiness. So there's the hedonic, which is about pleasure, which is about eating good food, having a good time with friends. And then there's the eudemonic, which is about finding something deeper and meaningful for you. So it may be work, it may be a sense of vocation, it may be a charity, but, you know, really making a contribution which goes beyond yourself, which is meaningful. And then finally, we have the A, which is the accomplishment or achievement. And rather than accomplishment or achievement, I like to think of this as a sense of continual progress. So making progress in your life. And I think, Lynn, that if you're able to, you know, really strike a balance between these 5 things in your life, you're going to be a pretty happy and resilient person.
Yeah, I think so. It sounds great. I really want to talk to you now about an organisation you're involved with, Growing with Gratitude.
Sure.
Because I'm
Absolutely.
really curious about actually very passionate about the need to teach children about resilience and give them a head start. And I'd love to hear more about what that organisation is about.
Thank you. Thanks for asking. I'd love to share that with you. Absolutely. So Growing with Gratitude, it's a positive mental health program. So it takes a very proactive approach to mental health in young people, because young people, you know, a lot of young people are suffering from anxiety, from depression at a younger and younger age. And that is extremely sad. So, you know, before this happens, we were trying to really intervene at an earlier stage so as to teach children the skills of happiness, resilience, character strands. We're trying to teach them how to become the best version of themselves so that when adversity strikes, stress from exams, divorce of parents, complicated relationships with peer groups, so that when all of these things come along, they'll already be mentally strong, tough human beings that are able to better face the challenges. And not only that, it's not only about countering the negative, but also equipping them with the psychological and emotional skills which will really aid them, which will really help them to really become the best versions of themselves, emotionally, psychologically, physically, and academically, because so many studies have proven that being a strong and mentally healthy person leads to academic success, and being a happy person too. Often people have it the wrong way around. They think that success leads to happiness, whereas many studies show that being a happy person leads to success in so many aspects of life. So, with Growing with Gratitude, we're teaching children the skills of gratitude, kindness, empathy, all of these kind of things which can really enhance their social relationships, the way they see themselves, and the way they relate to the rest of the world. And I think that really kind of spills out into every aspect of life. And so we go into primary schools, we have these 10-week programs, and we teach children the theory, we give them habits of happiness to practice, because one thing is learning the theory, but we have exercises that they can do on a weekly basis to really keep this going, to really ingrain it so it just becomes a natural way of being, because happiness is a natural state for human beings. So that's what we're trying to teach.
Excellent. And what's the feedback been on that program? Are there measurable changes in behaviour?
Absolutely, yeah. So this started in Australia, and really, we're just getting going in the UK and the rest of the world. The initial study came from a university in Australia. And yeah, absolutely, the feedback has been wonderful, greater academic success, happier children, a more peaceful, sort of happy and classroom environment. So the teachers have noted a little bit less stress and burnout. So, it's the pupils, it's the teachers, and then, there's this kind of spillover effect of the families too, and then the families extend to communities. This is the incredible thing, Lynn, about happiness and positive emotions. They really are extremely contagious. So, by teaching the children these skills, they then go home in different moods, so they interact with their parents in a different way. The parents then go out into the community, and they interact in a different way. It's a very positive, it's almost like a domino effect, but a very kind of positive domino effect. And so the feedback so far has been really good. And so what we're doing now, we're trying to come over to the rest of the world. And so I'm introducing this to schools in the UK. And, the UK is just coming on board with all of these mental health initiatives, but slowly but surely we're getting there. And of course, the rest of the world too. We'd like to spread the message and our program as far and wide as possible. So yeah, that's where we're at.
It's interesting that it's come out of Australia, because they've also got some amazing research on resilience. They seem to be, I don't like to say this as a New Zealander, we're quite competitive, but they really do seem to be, they're certainly ahead of New Zealand in terms of implementing strategies. Are there other countries that sort of seem to be progressing fast?
Yeah, I think, as you say, Australia really are the pioneers in many ways, and America too, North America, they seem to be leading. Australia and North America, and the rest of the world, we're just kind of, catching up, starting to catch up. But, for me, the sooner the better, because this is really powerful stuff. It's very simple, very easy to implement, but profound. Very, very profound. Lynn, I wonder how I got to the age of 33. I was 33 at the time of starting this master. I wondered how I got to that age without understanding emotions, without really knowing who I was authentically, knowing what my character strengths were, knowing some strategies to really increase my well-being. I wondered how I'd arrived to that age without knowing something that, while simple, is so profound and life-changing, I feel like this should be taught from a much, much, much younger age. But that being said, it can enhance anybody's life at any age. So I can't tell you what a fan of positive psychology I am. But obviously, this is what I love. This is what I do. This is my passion. But I think there's something for everybody within that field.
is there something that led you to positive psychology? Was it like an event in your life, or was it just something, you just became interested in?
Sure, I think it's a really interesting question, and when you look back, it's very easy to join the dots, as Steve Jobs famously said. But it was, for me, Lynn, I'd always had a massive interest in psychology, but I had originally studied languages. My first degree was in languages, and then I came over to Spain and I started teaching at the School of Psychology here in Barcelona, and I got involved with organising the International Congress of Coaching Psychology, and I was doing the translation, the interpretation. And it was one of those moments, Lynn, when you think, oh no, shouldn't this have been my life? This is kind of exactly what I'm about. This is what I love. This is what I've been reading about for the past 20 years. Shouldn't this be my life? And so it was one of those moments where I thought, wow, maybe it's now or never. So then I looked into the masters, the kind of training I could do, and I found this 3-year masters, and it went from there, really. And it was one of those times when suddenly everything just comes together and feels right, and it was the first time in my life that I really wanted something so very badly, because it's who I am. For me, my work and what I love, they're just who I am. I don't really separate my work from my identity, they're kind of beautifully intertwined. Who I am is what I do, and what I do is very much who I am. So it's very much a vocation for me, and so it just feels so good. It feels so good to be able to empower people in this way. I can't think of a better way to spend time. So this is what I love.
Oh, fantastic. So if I'm just, as an adult, and I've never, there was nothing at school for me to teach me about resilience. If I'm just beginning my journey, is there a particular place that you suggest would be the first step for me?
Yeah, sure. So I think before you can even think about becoming resilient, you've really got to think about who you are. And there's a tool that I really love, and this comes from the University of Pennsylvania in America. It comes from their website, and it's called the VIA, V-I-A, VIA Character Strengths Survey. And so you go to the University of Pennsylvania's website, you look for the VIA Character Strengths Survey, and this is a 240 question survey, so it's pretty exhaustive. And at the end of those 240 questions, it will give you a breakdown of your 24 character strands. It will give you a breakdown of your top strands. So it ranks the 24 human character strands, it ranks them for you personally. And I think when you begin to have an idea of your strengths, you can think about how you use them in life and how you at times perhaps overuse them to your detriment, because what we do well can also be detrimental if we do it too much or if we do it with the wrong people. So I think the first thing to do to become really resilient is to get to know who you are on a deeper level. So I would begin with getting to know your character strengths. Yeah, that would be the starting point. I then get to look at the acronym PERMA. I get to look at that, and I get to think about the aspects of my life in which perhaps I'm out of balance. So, is it the positive emotions? Is it the engagement, the relationships, the sense of meaning, the sense of accomplishment? Think about PERMA and see if you can find any place in life where you see any slight imbalance. In terms of other things you can do to become more resilient, it's been proven that by journaling, you can process your emotions very effectively. So, when we were speaking about emotions earlier and the need for emotional expression, if you don't yet feel comfortable to express yourself with other people, it's great to keep a diary. There was this wonderful study by a psychologist, James Pennebaker in America, and he found that even just keeping a journal for 4 consecutive days, 20 minutes each day, writing about the most negative or difficult moment in your life, after those 4 days, people experienced a real increase in mental and physical health and emotional well-being. So whilst it may be painful to process these emotions at the time, later you will experience the benefits. And that works well for both positive and negative events. So, it's also good to use journaling in a very positive way. So, for example, to imagine your best possible future self, there's a very similar exercise when you take 4 consecutive days to write about your life, writing about it in the present tense as though you're already living the life, and really letting go and saying, you know, I'm living here, I'm doing this. And after 4 consecutive days, once again, people experience a real increase in positive emotions, optimism, resilience. You know, they've got more motivation. So I would say, especially for people who perhaps are a little more introverted, don't really like expressing their emotions, that keeping a journal is a fabulous way to do so, even if it's just for those 4 days, as in the experiment, you know. So yeah, I would say getting very clear on your strengths, getting very clear on which aspect of your life you perhaps need to dedicate a little bit more time to, really becoming aware and able to express your emotions. And as we said earlier, Lynn, and I think you made the wonderful point, cultivating relationships, because at the end of the day, you know, we really do depend on a few good, high quality relationships.
Oh, wow. Great. Oh, you've given us so many tools, so I feel a bit greedy to be asking for one more. But
Not at all.
Is there a tool that you use regularly in your personal life to maintain your resiliency that perhaps you could share with our listeners?
A tool that I use, I wouldn't say I necessarily use one particular tool on a regular basis. I think, once again, Lynn, it's about coming to a point of real authenticity, of real self-knowledge and self-compassion. I think self-compassion is really, the power of it is really underestimated. You know, because the focus in the past was very much on self-esteem. And I think it's great to reach a high level of self-esteem. But sometimes in life, when something bad happens, what we really need to know is that it wasn't necessarily our fault. We didn't do anything wrong. And even if we did, it's very human to make a mistake. So besides self-compassion, besides really learning how to forgive yourself and to be very kind and gentle to yourself, it's also very important to cultivate what we call a growth mindset. And a growth mindset is seeing any mistake or any error, in inverted commas, as simply learning. So what I try to do when something goes wrong, I try to tell myself, okay, so I made a mistake, but it happened, and this is what I'm going to learn, and this is what I'm going to take away from it. What would I say to a good friend if she made the same mistake? You know, how would I speak to her? What is the tone of voice that I would use? And I try to imagine saying those words to myself, because I think very often we're very, very hard on ourselves. And what we really have to do is know these two things. Any error is simply learning. It's information for us to process, and we move on. And at the same time, we have to speak to ourselves in that very compassionate way, so as not to beat ourselves up and feel even worse. You know, we're humans. We do silly things all the time. We make mistakes all the time. But, you know, we constantly learn. We constantly grow. We constantly progress. And without that learning, without those difficult moments, you'll never achieve anything significant in life. You know, we have to learn to forgive ourselves, because we are ridiculous very much of the time, me included, you know. So I think, you know, for me, Lynn, it's learning not to take oneself too seriously. And I think that, you know, knowing that, and also knowing that negative emotions form a very real and live part of experience, those two learnings have been really transformational for me. And that is, you know, coming from a positive psychology background. I love the positive, but I embrace the negative too, because it's part of the human condition.
Oh, wonderful. That's a lovely place to leave it. Lisa, thank you so much for talking with me today. It's been so dense with information that I'm so looking forward to listening again. We will be providing links to a lot of the things that you mentioned as well. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you, Lynn. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for listening to today's show. There was just so much information in there, and I will be providing links on my website and on the Facebook page. So if you'd like to find out more about Lisa Avery, you can visit her website at workisvocation.com. So there's a lot more information to what Lisa is up to. You can also get more information about the podcast, upcoming guests, and other information about building resilience, both at the insideknowledge.blog website and also at our Facebook page, which is also called Inside Knowledge. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to you joining me for another episode.